Hi friends, and welcome back to MV Stories. Today we'll look at Reddit story, and if you like them, you can like, comment, and turn on notifications so you don't miss new videos. Today's story comes from the Am I the A-hole subreddit. It was posted by Saltalikia Pretzel and was titled, Am I the A-hole for getting pregnant without considering my roommate's feelings? I'm living with a friend in a 2-bedroom apartment in a major city, separate bathrooms. She also lives in a master, and we split rent evenly. I have a long-distance partner, and I recently discovered I am pregnant very early on. The current lease we are in ends on June 30th, and I asked my friend/roommate if she would be down to do a month-to-month lease for a few months after our lease and until I get closer to my due date, and then I would move in with my parents. My parents live in another major city that is about a 3-hour commute from my workplace, where I work in person twice a week, so understandably I wouldn't want to be doing this commute for longer than I have to. My roommate said she did not want to do month to month, and I said that was fine. I would just move down in July, when our lease is up. Today, my roommate informed me that she is not comfortable living with me until our lease ends because she did not sign up to be responsible for someone who is pregnant or trying to start a family, and therefore I needed to pay to break our lease so she wouldn't have to live with me for the next 3 months. I asked him what way me sharing a wall with her for the 3 months, as per our lease, would impact her in any way, given that I have not asked her for any support in my pregnancy so far. She said that it did not matter that I was not relying on her for support, as because she had to advocate for herself, and she didn't want the responsibility of living with someone who is pregnant, because what if something goes wrong? She also mentioned the possibility of my mom or a friend taking me to appointments, and therefore forcing her to be a part of this. She said she was very upset that I had not considered her feelings and what she was forced to be a part of when getting pregnant, and that it was my responsibility to pay for all the costs associated with breaking the lease early, as I am the one who changed the terms of us living together. To be clear, I am not, nor have I ever asked her to live with me close to my delivery or after I give birth, just to end our lease on June 30th, at which point I would be 4 months pregnant. She said this was an unfair and selfish ask of me, and she was disappointed that I didn't have the capacity to put myself in her position and think about how my pregnancy would affect her. She does have previous trauma relating to a pregnancy that did not end up going to term, to be fair. I told her I was okay with never mentioning my pregnancy to her or asking anything of her, but she insists that it is unfair of me to ask that we finish our lease through June 30th because I will still be pregnant, and it will be so hard for me to move in June. So therefore, I have to pay thousands of dollars to break the lease early. Am I the asshole for asking to finish out this lease for the next 3 months and forcing my roommate to coexist with me while I am in early pregnancy, given I did not consider how this would affect her and the potential liability she would have if I live with her while pregnant? Alternatively, am I the asshole here for asking that we split the costs of breaking the lease, given she is the one that no longer wants to live with me? AITAH, my partner and I were not long distance when we first started dating, but he's currently living out of state working and finishing his Master of Science. He has a 3-year contract at his current job that ends next June and has already made arrangements to work and study remotely part-time, close to my due date / after the baby is born. I also wanted to clarify that when I asked her if she'd be willing to continue our lease month to month after June 30th, I meant for a month or 2, not all the way up to my delivery date. And when she said she wasn't comfortable with doing so, I accepted her no and didn't press, as I completely understood. I just never foresaw her having such an issue with just riding out our lease for the next 3 months. AITAH 2. This pregnancy was unexpected and unplanned, and I found out I was pregnant on Sunday. I've been weighing the options whether to terminate or continue the pregnancy, given the situation. My partner and I decided to move forward with the pregnancy, but that isn't something that I've shared with my roommate yet, and certainly won't now. So as far as roommate is concerned, she doesn't even know if I will be pregnant 3 months from now. Relevant comments. Opie explains more about her roommate's past trauma. Opie says, "Thank you. Prior to literally yesterday, I was close friends with my roommate. I did know about her trauma and have routinely been a listening ear and validated her feelings surrounding what happened. I won't go into more details about her trauma because it's not my story to tell, but it's something we have discussed extensively beforehand. I definitely feel bad that I triggered her by accidentally getting pregnant, but I was shocked that someone that I considered a friend could be so callous and self-centered and unsupportive during a time that she, better than anyone, would understand is so difficult to navigate already without the added stress of housing instability. Before yesterday, I loved her very much and felt and showed a lot of empathy for her and tried to accommodate her many traumas in our living situation. For example, she has a reactive dog that she refuses to actively train. Prior to moving, and I expressed my own desire to get a dog in the wake of losing my soul dog last year. She assured me she would need time to get settled, but that this would be fine. When I brought up getting a dog 2 months into living together, she immediately said she would move out because she could not deal with the anxiety of having her reactive dog around another dog all the time. I offered to pay for training myself, and she refused, insisting her anxieties would not be eased by a professional dog trainer. So I accepted it and never brought up the dog again. I am willing to work with people's, especially my friends, mental illness and traumas, but what she demanded I do in this situation felt beyond the pale. Commenter 1 says, "Not the a-hole, your roommate clearly has some problems she needs to work through. If she cannot live with you until June, then she needs break the lease and move out early. This is next-level maintenance character syndrome. Imagine the audacity to tell someone they need to factor in your needs/wants before making a major life decision." Commenter 2 says, "Also, pregnancy can be accidental and not planned. I'd guess she has had something tragic happen around this topic. She is being unreasonable, but I think she is genuinely panicking about being there in case Opie has a miscarriage. She has not processed this trauma and cannot regulate her own feelings and reactions. These things can be brutal, for example, miscarrying a bigger fetus. If it happens suddenly at home, you are left to deal with a dead baby. So let's not minimize her trauma. When they have leased a certain date, I don't think anyone should move out before the lease ends. The roomie should get therapy ASAP though, not the a-hole." Edit. People who keep commenting me that why do I assume it is PTSD and not just bad behavior? Because she has the history and acting totally unhinged. She is having a severe mental health crisis, and that makes her act the way she does. When people have acute mental health crises, their thinking is warped. Also, the things that Opie has told about her behavior are in line with someone whose trauma had been triggered in the original meaning, not how people use it about hurting their feelings. Downvoted commenter says, "Opie is not being entirely truthful though. She says that she never asked her roommate to live with her near or after her delivery date. But in the first or second paragraph, Opie states that she did ask her roommate if she would be down to do month to month after their lease ends. And then Opie would move out close to her due date. So, how do you change the story within a couple of paragraphs is messed up, and I can only assume that she denies she asking her roommate to live with her during most of her pregnancy to her roommate's face. Of course, living with an obviously pregnant woman could trigger someone who had a traumatic pregnancy history, which Opie knows, but is very mad about. I think that may be what is driving the roommate to act like this. Because Opie, you did already ask her for something in regard to your pregnancy, and she is worried that the asks will keep on coming." Opie replied, "You're right, I did ask her to do month to month after our lease ended, but one, I would have still moved out well before my due date, as in 3 months or more, and I also absolutely accepted her no. I said I got it. I'm fine just moving out when our lease ends." Commenter 3 says, "Her not wanting to do month to month after the lease is up is totally fair. Her thinking you needed to factor her emotions and wants in your pregnancy are way out of bounds. Definitely not the a-hole. She wants the lease broken, then she can pay to do it." Opie replied, "Thank you. I agree, maybe I shouldn't have asked if she wanted to do month to month for clarity. I imagined extending the lease by 2 months or so, not all the way up until my due date in late November. But as soon as she said no, I completely respected that and assured her I'd made my own arrangements once our lease ended. Is Opie's roommate receiving therapy to deal with her past trauma? Opie says she's been in therapy for most of her adult life, and her mom is a mental health professional, which makes this all the more baffling. Commenter 4 says, not the a-hole. I really don't see how you being only 4 months pregnant by the time you move out is going to affect her at all. You're going to be long gone before the baby is born. Is she really ignorant of how pregnancy works? It won't be difficult for you to move at 4 months. And I don't get how you having appointments will force her to be part of this. You haven't asked her to take you to any appointments. Does she get upset if you go to the dentist? Weird. Opie replied, I truly wish I could understand how having a friend pick me up to take me to a pregnancy appointment would force her to be a part of anything. But she insists that other people being in and out of the house is forcing her to participate in my pregnancy. By seeing them, I guess? She refused to elaborate and said, do you not see how this is forcing me to be involved? Commenter 5 says, not the a-hole, but where is your partner in all this? Why would you move in with your parents and not your partner you're pregnant with? Opie replied, my partner is very supportive, but unfortunately has legal/other ties to a different state, which makes moving immediately financially impossible. I cannot move to be with him as my job requires me to be in person twice a week, and without doxing myself entirely, my job depends on a license, which I only have in my current state, not my partner's. It's not possible for me to up and move to him either, as I would be unable to get a job in his state. Thankfully, he's worked it out with his employer and his school to where we will be living together post-baby/in late pregnancy. Opie responds to a downvoted comment about her partner not wanting the baby. Opie says, he very much does. He'll be telling his parents this weekend. I just didn't mention this all in the post, as I didn't feel it was relevant. Commenter 6 says, would you have had the same reaction if you'd broken your leg or developed migraines or some other medical issues? She's an idiot. Ignore her drama and move out when your lease ends. Opie replied, the funny thing is I literally do have migraines and other chronic health conditions, which she knew about before living with me. Commenter 7 says, am I misunderstanding? Are you 1 month pregnant now? Opie replied, 6 weeks. Update. First, a little more background on my roommate. She and I were friends for about a year before we decided to live together. The pregnancy-related trauma I mentioned in my earlier post was her getting an abortion 2 years ago because she decided she did not want to have a child with her fiancé at the time, as he was verbally abusive and got her pregnant without her consent. She was open about this happening. She told me about her abortion the literal day that I met her. We also had a mutual friend who was trying to conceive with her husband at the time I got pregnant. This mutual friend would openly talk about her attempts to get pregnant, including a miscarriage with my roommate, and my roommate appeared to have zero issues discussing these topics with her and remaining this person's friend. Now on to what happened next. I took the advice of a lot of you and my IRL friends and told my roommate via text to have it in writing that I would not be leaving the apartment until our lease ended June 30th. I told her that if she felt uncomfortable, that was on her to manage, and she was welcome to make arrangements with the landlord. In response, she said, okay, which viewers of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City will recognize as a Gen Z fuck you. After I stood my ground, things at the apartment were tense. I spoke to her in person only once more when I asked if she would move her car so I could out her trash bins out. She said she would do it and then didn't, leaving me to scramble to get the bins out in time the next morning. She also routinely had guests over, in particular one former friend of mine that I had a falling out with unrelated to roommate, to antagonize me. She also replaced all the pictures of us in the apartment with pictures of her and this former friend. I'll admit that I was petty too. I took my microwave and toaster out of the kitchen and put up a single ultrasound picture in a common area, but I removed it after 2 days since I felt bad. In general, though, I stayed in my room 99% of the time I was in the apartment and did not see or speak to her again after early April. I completely stopped using the kitchen and common areas. Even when I had my mom visit, she and I would spend all our time locked in my room. Unexpectedly and without telling me, my roommate moved out on May 8th. She took several of my things, blocked me in the driveway for hours, and refused to reimburse me for the couch we had bought together and utilities she still owed me. When I asked her to reimburse me for these things over text, she said that she would not be paying me anything because I had bullied her out of the house and had been hostile to her friends so they could not come over. These texts were a little concerning because, again, I had not even spoken to her in over a month at this point. I had never asked her not to bring certain people over and did not consider my taking the microwave and toaster away bullying any more than I considered her putting up photos of a person I disliked all over our apartment bullying. Regardless, I thought I was finally free and was willing to lose the $500 I paid or the couch and the $100 she owed me in utilities if it meant she was out of my life. Despite taking several things that belonged to me, she was kind enough to leave her side of the fridge full of rotten food, leave trash strewn all over her old room, leave unpatched holes in the wall, and leave a cabinet her dog had chewed up unrepaired. Surprisingly, she paid rent for the month of June. Prior to her moving out and this conflict arising, another mutual friend, though he was primarily my friend, to be fair, had asked if he could stay with us on and off for the month of June while he completed a residency for his physician's assistant program in our city. Both of us had said yes and planned to let him stay in our spare room. After roommate moved out and been out for over a month, my friend came to stay. Since my roommate had had the master bed/bath and paid the same to me as rent, by the way, I set up an air mattress in her old room as well as a desk. The spare room was on the other end of the apartment from the bathrooms and was adjacent to the kitchen, so I thought setting him up in my roommate's old room made more sense and gave him more privacy. As he was a guest, I didn't charge him any rent or utilities, just let him stay because I appreciated the company. 2 weeks before our lease ended, and well over a month after she had moved out, my roommate and her dad used a spare key to re-enter the apartment. My friend was there at the time, but I wasn't. She told my friend she and her dad were there to patch holes in the wall, but left after only a few minutes without making any effort to repair the property damage she and her dog had caused. Instead, she sent an email to the landlord alleging that I was violating our lease by illegally subletting her room and demanding that I reimburse her for rent. My landlord was thankfully a rational person who also thought my roommate was crazy and told her that any dispute was between the two of us and he would not be reimbursing her for rent. Shortly after the landlord politely told her to get fucked, she emailed me, CCing her parents. She is a 28-year-old practicing attorney, by the way, alleging that I had violated the lease, that she had it on good authority, that I had multiple people living with me for months, that my friend visiting was trespassing/squatting, and was at the apartment illegally, and that if I did not reimburse her for her rent for the months of May and June, she would be escalating the matter. Unfortunately for her, I too am an attorney who evidently paid much more attention in torts and property class than she did. I read through the lease and saw that it did not prescribe guests, but did limit occupancy to 2 adults, not lessees, at one time. A violation of this portion of the lease entitled the landlord to raise the rent, but did not entitle the co-lessees to any liquidated damages for the breach. I wrote her a very strongly worded email in which I detailed that I had not broken our lease. She had suffered no damages. My friend was not trespassing nor squatting, as he had my permission to be there, and I was a co-tenant that had the right to possess the entirety of the property, and that I would therefore not be reimbursing her for absolutely anything. I also included texts of her agreeing to reimburse me for the couch, admitting that her dog had destroyed the property, and giving me permission, though again this was not necessary, to have guests, including my friend in question, over any time. Finally, I defined reproductive coercion and abuse for her and told her that her actions were essentially an attempt to coerce me into an abortion and then abusing me financially when I refused to terminate the pregnancy at her request. I told her not to contact me again and that she was welcome to take me to small claims court and explain to a judge why she had moved out early. If she did so, I would be countersuing her for her unpaid utilities and the couch. Since then, she's been silent. I moved out last weekend and asked the landlord to split out deposit in half, which he agreed to. My pregnancy is progressing well, and I'm nearly halfway through. And it seems like this saga is finally over, fingers crossed. Relevant comments. Commenter 1 says, not the a-hole. She really thought she could pull the I'm a lawyer card on another lawyer and win El Mayo. Good for you for standing your ground and protecting your peace. Congrats on the pregnancy. Hope the rest of it is stress-free. Commenter 2 says, I'm a lawyer too, and it does not surprise me that the ex-roommate would do this. The ex-roommate, no doubt, thought she was right. That's why we have courts and judges to decide which lawyer is right. Before I was married, I shared an apartment with another lawyer. She was a real joy, and I say this, either way, all sarcasm duly intended. I sympathize with the Opie. Opie replied, I say this as someone who worked very hard to be a lawyer, but we really can be just the worst sometimes. Commenter 3 says, to be fair, you might be the worst sometimes, but at least you aren't a 28-year-old practicing attorney CCing my mommy and daddy on a baseless legal threat. Worst. That detail is absolute gold. Opie replied, I was honestly embarrassed for her. I was also just shocked that she seemed to misunderstand basic torts like trespassing or basic contract principles like liquidated damages, because this is stuff you're literally meant to learn your first year of law school. Her vague threat to escalate the matter and call police because I was doing something illegal by having a guest at the apartment I paid rent to live in was honestly shocking. I just imagine the cops would laugh at her. Commenter 4 says, please tell me when you replied to her email you reply. Also, her parents can see what she is doing. Please tell me you did that. Opie replied, oh, I replied all to that motherfucker. Hope her parents got a wake-up call, but I doubt it since they raised her to be this entitled. Commenter 5 says, hell yeah. My other question is this. Did she ever show any other behaviors to suggest she was into you romantically? This reads like an incel who throws a fit because the barista he thought was into him has a boyfriend. Opie replied, you aren't the first person to mention that. I never got the sense that she was into me romantically, but she did treat me very differently to her other female friends. She often told me I was a safe person for her and often expected me or outright told me to suppress my own needs and wants because hers were more important or her mental health was worse. Looking back, I think it was just a toxic relationship, and she felt like she had the right to control my behavior. When I stood up to her by refusing to move out, it was like she'd suffered the biggest betrayal ever because I think she really expected me to apologize for getting pregnant without considering her feelings and move out, shouldering all the expenses without question. Opie explains more about how the roommate viewed Opie's boyfriend and the pregnancy. Opie says, you're right on the money. She labeled my partner as abusive and would often tell me stories about things my partner had done that were entirely untrue, exaggerated, or made up. When I would tell her she was wrong, she'd insist that I had told her these, often outright lies, things about my partner. For example, confided in her that once, in our over 3 years of dating, he told me, fuck you, during an argument, something I agree is unacceptable behavior, in which he has only done the one time. After learning this, she told me he was not allowed in the apartment because he triggered her, comparing him to exes that had sexually and physically assaulted her and tried to kill her. As we're long distance, that meant I had to pay for a hotel anytime he visited. I pushed back on this, and she told me she had decided I had a right to have him visit, but that I had to constantly text her updates of where we were so she would never have to look him in the face. I once asked her if my partner ever did something to her to make her feel uncomfortable or afraid, and she said no, but that she was in therapy to try and understand how I could remain in a relationship with a man like him. I didn't mention this, but her initial reaction to my pregnancy also shocked me. I told her I was pregnant, and she said, oh, don't worry, the abortion isn't that bad. When I told her I was actually thinking of keeping the pregnancy, it felt like things were immediately off. 5 days later, she told me she no longer felt comfortable living with me, etc. I remember at one point I said, it feels like you're giving me the choice between getting an abortion and having a place to live or keeping my pregnancy and suffering financially. And she said, no, I'm just asking you to take responsibility for your actions. As she told me I was making it very hard for her to self-advocate because I was acting like she was attacking me. I was like, is that not literally what you're doing? Commenter 6 says, what does she do when she sees random pregnant people in her daily life? At the grocery? At the drugstore, etc. They are everywhere. Also, how would she have been impacted if you didn't know or tell her for your early pregnancy? Your reproductive status doesn't affect her at all. She's nuts. Opie replied. She seemed to be completely fine with other pregnant people, including our mutual friend. It really seems like the only person she had an issue with being pregnant was me. Commenter 7 says, I'm assuming she didn't have any deposit left, as that would have been required for the repairs to the property? Opie replied, no, I paid for the cost to repair the damage / repaired it myself before the move-out inspection, as I figured that would be cheaper than a landlord making an exaggerated claim of how much it cost to repair the walls and cabinet. She never contributed to these costs, but oh well. Commenter 8 says, she's an idiot and you were too nice. I would have taken the entire deposit, her part being reimbursement for unpaid utilities and the couch since you had evidence of these debts. Opie replied, I truly considered asking the landlord to just send the deposit to me and keeping it all, but I'm honestly a little afraid of her because she doesn't seem to be in touch with reality and I didn't know what she might do in revenge for me stealing from her. Commenter 8 says, you should have kept it as reimbursement for cleaning up the mess she left behind. I bet you documented everything, so you could have argued that the deposit was your payment for cleanup and repairs. Opie replied, I wanted to, but I was, and to some degree still am, afraid of her and don't want to take this to small claims court. I'm confident I would win, but I don't want to see her ever again, and having her leave me alone forever is honestly worth every penny. Opie on being an emotional abusing person for the roommate. Opie replied, I think in general, she projected a lot of her trauma onto me and generally expected me to manage her mental illnesses for her. She once told me she had a hard time saying no, so therefore I was not allowed to ask her for things she would have to say no to. I asked her if I could get a dog, which was allowed so long as I notified the landlord and paid the pet deposit. And she said she would just move out instead and that it was manipulative of me to ask her when I knew she has a hard time saying no to things. And thus I was basically forcing her to either say yes or move out. That was back in September, and I should have taken that as a sign she was unwell, but at the time I thought I could make it through the end of the lease.